Welcome back to Our on the Internet. Okay, so tonight Max is vid by Lydia Loves Timelines and it's called How Family Guy Failed Brian. Yeah. Definitely they failed Brian, right? He's been the most level-headed one out of the lot. But he still was pretty funny. And now he's just a prick. who is probably worse than Quagmire. That's the only thing possible. But he's a saint compared to Carter Peterschmidt, so yeah. But damn, let's see the ways that they failed Brian Griffin as a character. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into his reaction.
Channel, I've talked a whole lot about how Family Guy characters have changed over its 20-year run. Some for the better, and others for the worse. But no other character has suffered a bigger decline than Brian Griffin. This period started out as Peter's level-headed friend, his conscience, and his voice of reason, and in many ways, he was the show's moral compass.
Yeah, and now they fucked him up.
This dog, Beef is very erudite, well-spoken character.
But as Family Guy went on, Brian became dumber, pretentious, and cruel, slowly transforming into an egotistical douchebag.
God, Brian, you are such a scumbag.
So, when did this massive character
He became a bigger
shift happen,
scumbag than
and
Quagmire.
why did it happen? Let's get into it. Now, I know for many of you, Family Guy has been around longer than you've even been alive. I mean, I was only 4 years old when it premiered in 1999, so
I just
many
was
of
born
us
when it came out.
started watching it a good few years into the show's run. Therefore, we've mostly only known Brian as a pretentious D-bag with a huge ego. Or as Gillian would put it,
and he's got a big ego.
but in the early seasons, he was a much different character. He was someone of high intellect and morals with an equally sharp, dry wit. He was someone just trying to find meaning in his lonely life. And it seemed to me that Brian was always Seth MacFarlane's self-insert character, the creator of the show's way to integrate himself into his own cartoon. I mean, they are similar in many ways. They are both liberals, they both share a love for swing and Sinatra-style music, and they are both atheists.
I'm an atheist.
I mean, Seth doesn't even really change his voice when he performs as Brian.
Hate Trivial Pursuit. Always makes me feel so stupid.
More stupid than that time you locked your keys out of the car?
Now, since the beginning, Family Guy has been known for its crass humour, never shying away from a cheap fart joke. But I always felt that Seth used Brian to inject some much-needed balance to the show, and despite being a talking dog, he did add some levity. Brian's episodes were usually much deeper and far more intelligent than any Peter-centric episode. For example, in Season 1's Portrait of a Dog, it focused on Brian realizing that he's a second-class citizen, a lower species with less rights than humans, and someone who isn't even allowed to drink from the same water fountain. The episode then saw Brian become down in his luck, he becomes homeless, and at his very lowest, he attacks a man. And because of this, he is sentenced to be euthanized. So, being the intelligent and driven character he was at the time, he decides to defend himself in court.
So what went wrong?
As much about law as possible. He even begins his trial by referencing the segregation court case of Plessy v. Ferguson, but is immediately cut off.
Wait a minute, why are we listening to a dog? Take him away!
Luckily, Brian's eventually freed after Peter bribes the judges. But even still, the episode still ends with Brian drinking from the same water fountain as everyone else. This discussion of equality, even if it did center around a talking dog, was more ethically mature for a show like Family Guy. His character was deepened emotionally in Season 2's Brian in Love that first showed us that Brian had therapy sessions. This was carried over into the episode Road to Rhode Island, which revealed that Brian had deep abandonment issues stemming from being taken away from his mother. And this episode not only showed his character growth, but also gave us our very first Brian and Stewie pairing that would go on to some amazingly iconic episodes.
These two are funny as
Brian
fuck.
Wallows and Peter Swallows not only holds Brian's most memorable moment, but it's also one of the most heartfelt episodes in the entire show. Now I won't go too deeply into his story, as you can check out my friend Tariq's video on it. But basically, it shows Brian caring for an elderly lady after getting a DUI. And although he can't stand her at first, the two soon connect deeply on an emotional level, and they fall in love. And
Then
just
she
to
died.
reveal that Brian has finally found happiness is tragically taken away when Pearl dies. The final scene of them using VR headsets to live their lives together is both beautiful and heartbreaking.
Oh, how sad.
And the season 4 episode, You May Now Kiss the Guy Who Receives, focused on Brian now standing up for the rights of others. When gay marriage was made illegal in Quahog, it meant that his cousin Jasper wasn't able to marry his partner, so Brian fought. He went on to collect 10,000 signatures to oppose the bill and even held Mayor West hostage. And even though he took it to the extreme, Brian's heart was definitely in the right place. He succeeded and the bill was torn up. Now, talking outside of the episode, Seth MacFarlane himself was an outspoken advocate for gay rights, and he came up with the idea of this episode himself. Therefore, Brian was essentially Seth's mouthpiece in this episode, talking about the injustices that gay people live with. And although Seth didn't write these particular episodes, he was still heavily involved in the creative process as an executive producer, so he still had a lot of influence in the direction of these characters. But this all changed when he shifted focus onto other projects like the Ted movie. In a Reddit
them
AMA,
Ted
he
movies.
explained that he felt
Let me see. I jumped between TV and film for that reason. Yeah. I felt fried after 12 years of Family Guy, so I left to Ted. At some point, maybe I'll wind up writing Family Guy full time again. Okay, yeah, I mean, fair enough. He's been doing Family Guy for years upon years. So, yeah. But damn, I like... the Ted movies were funny as hell. I'm gonna watch the second one again, though, mind you. But the first one was the best one. But I need to watch it again before I make my judgments on that.
out after working on Family Guy for over a decade. And it was around 2010 to 2011 that he left the creative side on the show and transitioned into a voice-only role.
Yeah, these days I do voiceover on Family Guy, but that's really about it.
So it would have been around the 8th or 9th season when Seth stopped being involved completely in the writer's room. So I don't think it was a big coincidence that it was around this time that I noticed a big change in all of the Family Guy characters, especially Brian. He became more pretentious and turned into a real hound dog, constantly chasing tail all around town. A far cry from season 3 when he craved a deeper connection
He
to
was a
women,
hoe, pretty
rather
much.
than just sex. A trait that was already owned by Quagmire, so it did feel odd that the creators were almost trying to duplicate it.
I'm a little creeped out.
Hey, congratulations. Somebody famous now hates you.
I mean, in one episode, Brian dated a blind woman who...
Oh yeah,
said
this.
that she-
Oh, I remember this episode when he dated a blind gal who hated dogs. Of course, she was blind, but her family was not. But that shit was so funny. I'm not gonna lie. And even after he not coming clean, he still tricked her again. What a douchebag.
hated dogs. So what does he do? He lied and pretended to be a human. And when she eventually found out the truth and dumped his ass, he then pretended to be a different guy by putting on a voice.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Noah from J-Date.
Fuck's sake, man.
And it wasn't just his
That's the thing
sexual
Quagmire would do.
His political leanings and morals soon diminished too.
He became the
He's
biggest
turning
sellout
into
ever.
A liberal hypocrite who would happily sell out his values if it benefits him. As mentioned, Seth was no longer around, and so not as invested as he was in what direction the writers took the characters. So it was only natural that Brian was no longer being used to tackle social issues that Seth cared about anymore, because he wasn't really there. And I believe season 12's The Life of Brian best exemplifies Seth's feelings towards Family Guy around this time. Killing off Brian showed that Seth had completely distanced himself creatively and emotionally from the show. So, to talk about this controversial moment in Family Guy history, I asked a little help from the biggest Brian Griffin fan I know, LS Mark.
Hey, Lydia,
Take it
I
away.
just got your message. So, what do you want to chat about? Fairly Odd Parents timeline or Five Nights at Freddy's, perhaps?
Nah, I want to hear you talk about Brian's death in Family Guy again.
When did I become the Brian Griffin guy? Okay, let's journey back to 2013 when I was 11 years old and a big Family Guy fan.
I was 14
I
around
had
this time.
the DVDs, the toys, whatever this was.
Oh, that's ahoy.
Which brings me to who my favorite
Really?
character was.
Okay.
Brian always felt like the realest one in the show, despite being a talking dog. Whether he was looking for his lost mother, fighting for custody of his children, or finding love, his episodes always stood out to me as being some of the best in Family Guy. So imagine my reaction when I watched this for the first time.
I love you all.
Oh, that episode was sad.
Yeah, I cried. No, seriously, I'm not exaggerating. I cried at the death of Brian Griffin. I loved Family Guy.
Jesus Christ.
So seeing one of my favorite characters...
It's just a cartoon, bro.
...in front of my 11-year-old eyes, that messed me up. And I wasn't the only one. It sparked massive backlash from fans all around the world, with tens of thousands signing petitions to bring him back. Hell, some people even got him branded on their skin in...
Nah, they really got a Brian tattoo. Wow, these fans of Family Guy are so invested. I know a lot of my friends loved Family Guy back in the day, but even if they were old enough to do so, they would not have done this. At least I like to think that they wouldn't have. Jesus Christ, man. But yeah, the early seasons of Family Guy were the best ones. But I don't think it takes a rocket. I think the majority would agree with me on that one.
solidarity. The response to Brian's death
But
was
whatever.
so wide that the writers couldn't ignore it any longer, bringing him back just 2 episodes later. Except, it's not exactly what happened. Even though many people believed that the backlash brought Brian back, that simply wasn't true. Brian was always planned to return when he did. It takes roughly around a year for an episode to be completed, so it would have been impossible to create an entire episode in just a couple of weeks. Basically, it was just a big hoax to fuck with us. A cheap trick to boost ratings. Seth MacFarlane even tweeted as much, saying it was trying to teach us some Christmas family lesson. Yeah, right, Seth. What's worse is that when he was brought back, the writers dialed Brian's douchiness up to 1,000.
Oh.
He tricked Quagmire out of thousands of dollars and even gave Stewie herpes. And personally, I think it would have been better if Vinny stayed and Brian stayed, well, dead. If you want to hear more hot takes or more on Brian specifically, then check out my videos over on my channel. Or if you've got an odd 5 hours knocking around, then hey, check out my 5-hour-long Family Guy ranking. Thanks for having me on again, Lydia, and letting me relive my childhood trauma.
Thanks so much, Mark. And carrying on from what you were saying, I feel that Brian's death signified that Seth was pretty much done with the character and the show as a whole. I just can't imagine Seth signing off on this cheap fake death trick back in the earlier seasons, especially for a character he was obviously so connected with. And when Brian returned, this marked the biggest turning point for his character, where his worst traits were amplified to 1,000,000. And let's face it, his faults were always kind of there, but they made him interesting. But the writers really went ham on all of the negative aspects of his personality, which kind of made us...
What the hell?
Don't go in
No.
there! No Wi-Fi. Okay, I'll just chill then. Come on, Matt. With you.
hate him. For example, in season 6's The Former Life of Brian, it showed that he had an estranged son called Dylan. And although he was reluctant at first to be his parent, Brian did step up to support the kid. And the two did become super close, making the ending all the more emotional
They
when
just
Dylan left
used
to take
him.
care of his sick mother.
I'm proud of you, Dylan. My life
And after he found out that didn't make it big in Hollywood, he thought,
However,
oh, I could
this
benefit
was
from
all
this.
undone by season 12's Brian's a Bad Father, released only a couple of episodes after Brian returned from the dead. The episode reveals that he's been completely ignoring his son,
Hey, if I click ignore, will he know that I'm sending him to voicemail?
avoiding him, dodging his calls, but that all changes when he discovers that Dylan is an actor on a successful TV show, and he even guilt trips Dylan into getting him a job in the writer's room, basically using him to fulfill all of his own ambitions.
That was fucked up.
Terrible father.
It seems that the moral compass we labelled Brian as initially was spiralling out of control. They turned him into a complete psychopath at this point. Like, do you remember that time in season 15 where he lets a woman drown just because she has a baby? Yeah, that's messed up. And to really bring us to that full circle moment, do you remember when we talked about how Brian was fighting for equality in season 1? Well, in season 16's The Wolf of Wall Street, he completely sells out his own dog Kind when they discover his investment in a protein drink company that makes products out of dogs. And instead of getting out of it and informing the police, Brian insists on resuming the investment.
Wall Street is a
No.
eat dog world. Everyone knows that. Oh my God.
That is until he finds himself on the receiving end and is about to get blended into a protein shake. Stewie does save him in the end, but instead of looking within and taking accountability, he instead pins the blame on the evils of Wall Street.
You did it for 1 week and were literally eating your own kind. This isn't about Wall Street. I cannot stress that enough.
But complaining that Family Guy characters are now cruel is kind of like complaining that water is wet, because they're all pretty much awful by this point. And I don't want to be all negative about Brian, because you know what? Despite all of this, I don't dislike him. And I know this is probably a controversial opinion, but I do kind of like douchebag Brian. No, I know. I won't deny he was a lot more complex and better written earlier on in the show, but his pretentiousness is kind of hilarious. And personally, I think it's kind of funny when he goes all pseudo-intellectual.
But not everybody will get that. That's just for the scholars 100 years from now.
His intelligence is all surface level, and so I love it when Stewie groans and calls Brian out on all of his bullcrap.
Just like I knew your play was a mediocre patchwork of hackneyed ideas and tired cliches.
Like when he's so desperate to be a writer, yet he doesn't read himself.
Well, I'm sort of between books right now. Yeah? What was the last thing you read? He's got you on the ropes now.
And he'll repeatedly name drop a superfluous fact just to seem smart.
Now you're starting to sound like Mark Twain, whose real name was Samuel Clemens.
Oh, that is so your go-to.
I've just always found these moments to be really funny, mostly because it plays so well against Stewie. And even today, you can't deny that the Stewie and Brian Griffin episodes are usually the best ones.
They are.
And I'm
They
certainly
very
not
much are.
arguing that he's a better character now, like, at all. But I do still enjoy Brian episodes, for the most part at least. I just wish that the writers wouldn't take it to the absolute extreme every time, because it makes him very, very difficult to root for.
Hey, don't touch me. I'm rich. He just makes it so difficult to be on his side.
But what are your thoughts about Brian? Do you like him now, or do you still prefer him in the earlier season?
I'm torn. The guy, this doggery has had a fall from grace. And it's just a show. It's just a show. Brian had a fall from grace, but honestly, it's him and Stewie, right? The dynamic between those two is the funniest thing. That's why some people still watch Family Guy. Like, people don't really watch it for, like, Peter and Lois anymore. They watch it for Brian and Stewie for the most part. And that's what I watch anyway. Those two is fucking hilarious. But, nah, I'm still mortified from that episode where Stewie impregnated himself with Brian's DNA. Brian punched himself and was like, is it dead yet? Oh my god, that shit made me laugh. But I could have done without seeing what a Brian and Stewie hybrid would look like. Ugh, nasty. I'm still scarred. But, wow, man. They made him a worse parent than Peter or Quagmire. They've got to say the episode where Brian died was sad. Near enough just as sad as the one with Quagmire's sister. Was it him, Brenda Quagmire? I think. Anyways, I'm jumping right into comments and see what people are saying right now. Someone said, I think the character who suffered the biggest decline was Bonnie, loving housewife to just waiting to murder her husband. Jesus Christ. Yeah, they did do that to Bonnie, didn't they? They really did kill Brian's character though, mind you. Ever since Brian died and came back to life again, he's become pretty unbearable. He was a great character in the first 4 to 5 seasons, but they keep having him chase after women every other episode, it seems. They're trying to make him like Quagmire 2.0 without the charm. But then again, since when did Quagmire have charm? He's a giant perv. You can't go longer than a minute without perving women. Biggest womanizer in that show. If Quagmire was a real person, he'd be in jail and be a registered sex offender. I mean, isn't he already that on the show? Oh, wow. Someone said, I just watched the episode where he let the kids at Stu's daycare suffer because he was trying to snatch the teacher. Yeah, as soon as he found out she had a boyfriend, he called the authorities. Oh, yeah, I remember that episode. That episode was funny. And he was like, I'm not stopping till I see every inch of her naked or something. Like, I was fucking cracking up. Brian's such a douche and a perv. I can't with that dog. I thought Quagmire was bad. But yeah, I think there's worse characters in that show now. All the characters have just sunk lower and lower as the seasons went on. It is what it is. Why do you think I watched the early season and not the newer ones? It is what it is. But yeah, I gotta go. Interesting, though. Very intriguing, even. At least for me anyway. Don't know about you, but for me, yeah. I found it intriguing, but yeah, I gotta go. Okay, so that's it for this video. Like, subscribe if you want. I post if I feel like it, and I'll see you next one. Bye.